Hello and welcome to our number talk. Today we are looking at the expression 11 times 24. What we do in a number talk is we use mental math. That means no paper, no pencil, to try to solve this expression. Then we look at all the different ways we could have figured it out. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and do that. Pause the video, figure out 11 times 24 in your head. When you have your answer, unpause it, and we will look at all of the strategies together. So the first thing we could have done is to use our distributive property to break apart one of our factors into two smaller addends to help us get some partial products. It just makes multiplication a little bit easier. So let's see if we could take a look at our 11 times 24 in a new way. You see I've got my 24 and that's kind of big, but you know what? I want to break this up into a 12 plus 12. So I'm going to take my 24, break that up into 12 plus 12, and I'm still going to multiply my 11 by both of those. So you notice I got my 12 plus 12. That's because now that I'm going to multiply my 11 by both my 12s, well, 11 times 12, that's a fact that I should probably know. 11 times 12, that's 132. So if I just do that twice, those are my two partial products, 11 times 12, 11 times 12. Add those two up. That's the same as doing 11 times 24. So I take my 132 and my 132, and I'm going to get my answer of 264. Hopefully that's the answer that you had in your head. We can also take our 24, and instead of breaking it up in half, let's break it up by place value. So let's imagine our 24 as if it were an expanded form, 20 plus 4. We're still going to distribute out that 11 to both the 20 and the 4 to get us some partial products. So we're going to do 11 times 20. Now that's pretty easy because we know 11 times 2 is 22. So 11 times 20 is going to be 22 with a 0 at the end. And then we're going to add the 11 times 4. And that's also a basic fact. That's 44. So 220 plus 44 gets us our 264 once again. Now we could keep our 24 together, and we could break apart our 11. And we could say, you know what, let's break the 11 apart into place value, just like we did the 24. Let's do 10 plus 1. Still going to multiply that 24 out by both, and we'll see what we get. We'll get 10 times 24, so that's easy. That's 240 with a 0, or 24 with a 0 gets us 240. And then we've got a 1 times 24, so that's actually very simple. Add the 240 and the 24, and guess what we're going to get? We're going to get back to our 264 again. Now, another strategy that sometimes works is going to be compensation. So let me show you what that looks like. We're going to take one of our numbers. We're going to change it a little bit to make it easier to multiply with. I'm going to add 1 to that 24. So I'm going to pretend like this whole thing is 11 times 25, just because 25 is a little bit easier to multiply with. That's like quarters. So I'm thinking, well, if I had 11 quarters, well, that would be 275 or $2.75. But 11 quarters gets me 275. But I did have a little bit extra. I added an extra set of 11. So I'm going to need to go ahead and get rid of one of those sets of 11 to get back to my only 24 right there. And that's going to get me there's my 11. So 275, take away that 11, and guess what that gets me? My 264. So sometimes compensation works. We can also use the associative property. So this is a different property. This is our grouping property. So our grouping property takes a look at our factors and says if you've got 3 or more factors, you can rearrange their groups. So I'm going to reimagine this 24. I'm not going to do addition like I did with the distributive property. I'm going to reimagine this as a, let's call it a 3 times 8, because 24 is 3 times 8. So now I've got 3 factors. 11 times 3 times 4, that's the same as 11 times 24. And so the associative property is just going to let me shift my parentheses. So I can do now 11 groups of 3 instead of 3 groups of 8. Now I don't really want to do 11 groups of 3. I'd rather do 3 groups of 11. So I'm going to flip the order, 3 groups of 11, and that's where the commutative property comes in. The commutative property lets me switch the order. 3 times 11, 11 times 3. That's the same. It's just easier for me to draw 3 groups of 11 because that's what I've got right here, 3 groups of 11. But I've got 8 groups of 3 groups of 11. So I'm going to flip the order one more time, and that's what I finally have. I'm going to take my 3 groups of 11, which is 33, because I've got 1, 2, 3 groups of 11, and I'm just going to skip count by 33s all the way up until I hit 8 times. So that's 33, that's 66, that's 99, 132, 165, 198, 231, and guess where we end up? 264. So that's the associative property working with the commutative property. We could do the same thing. We can't break up that 11 because it's a prime number. It's going to be 11 times 1. That doesn't help us at all. But we could take a look at this 11 and multiply it. Instead of 24, let's just reimagine our 24 as a 12 times 2. That's another way we could have done it. So once again, we're going to shift our parentheses here. So that's going to be 11 groups of 12. But now we need to go ahead and let's just flip the order here. Let's do 2 groups of 11 groups of 12. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 groups of 12. So I know what 11 times 12 is. That's going to give me my 132. And I've got 2 groups of those, so I just take my 132 and I double it. And I'm going to get 264. So those are just a few of the ways that you could have solved 11 times 24. If you can find another way, that's fantastic. Go ahead and drop that as a comment on the video. If you are a teacher would like a copy of the slide deck for your own use in the classroom, you can find it on my website, 5minutemath.net.